Did you know that the two stars of In a Lonely Place were once deeply in love in real life? And by the time the cameras rolled, their romance was already falling apart? That heartbreak you see on screen? It wasn't all acting. It was two people watching their own love story crumble, take after take, scene after scene. Humphrey Bogart and Gloria Grahame brought a kind of pain to this movie that no director could ever plan. The anger was real. The sadness was real. And the loneliness? That was the most real thing of all. This 1950 film noir classic is more than a murder mystery. It's a dark mirror held up to Hollywood itself, a story about a man who could be brilliant and terrifying at the same time. And behind the camera, the secrets were just as dramatic as anything on screen. Broken marriages, dangerous stunts, rewrites that changed everything at the last minute, studio fights that almost killed the whole project. If you think you know this movie, think again. Let's dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about In a Lonely Place. Number 20. The director married the leading lady. Then regretted casting. Here's something that sounds like it came straight out of a movie script, except it really happened. Nicholas Ray, the director of In a Lonely Place, was married to Gloria Grahame when production began. That's right, the man calling action and cut was going home every night with the woman playing Laurel Gray. Now you might think that would make things easier. A husband and wife working together, understanding each other, creating something beautiful. But it was the opposite. Their marriage was already in serious trouble. Arguments at home followed them to the set. Tension filled every scene they worked on together. Ray had actually fought against casting Grahame. He didn't want his personal life bleeding into his professional work. But the studio, Columbia Pictures, pushed hard. They had Grahame under contract and believed she was perfect for the role. Ray gave in, but he wasn't happy about it. And here's the twist that makes this whole thing even stranger. That tension, that awkwardness, that feeling of two people who once loved each other but can't quite connect anymore. It made the movie better. You can feel it in every scene between Bogart and Grahame. There's a warmth that keeps pulling back, a closeness that never fully arrives. Critics later said the film had one of the most realistic portrayals of a doomed romance ever put on screen. They didn't know half the reason why. Ray and Grahame divorced shortly after filming wrapped. Their love story ended, but the movie it left behind became immortal. Sometimes the worst personal pain creates the best art. What looked like chemistry on screen was really two hearts breaking in silence. Number 19. Bogart's real temper scared the cast. Humphrey Bogart was known as one of the toughest guys in Hollywood. But on the set of In a Lonely Place, some people wondered where the acting stopped and the real man began. Bogart played Dixon Steele, a screenwriter with a violent temper, a man who could charm you 1 second and terrify you the next. And the truth is, Bogart had a temper in real life too. He was going through a rough patch during filming. His relationship with his wife, Lauren Bacall, was strained. He was drinking more than usual, and he carried a kind of restless anger that people on set could feel like heat from a fire. During one particular scene, Bogart had to grab a man by the collar and shove him. The script called for controlled aggression. But Bogart went harder than anyone expected. The actor on the receiving end stumbled backward and nearly fell into a piece of equipment. The crew went quiet. Nicholas Ray didn't call cut right away. He just watched. And then, quietly, he said, "Print it." That take made it into the final film. You can watch it and see the shock in the other actor's eyes. That wasn't rehearsed. That wasn't choreographed. That was Bogart letting something real slip through. Later, Bogart apologized. He said he got carried away. But the crew noticed something. Every time Bogart lost a little control, the movie got a little more powerful. It was like watching lightning. Beautiful, but dangerous. You never knew when it would strike. That wasn't acting. It was a man wrestling with his own demons, and the camera caught every second of it. Number 18. The original ending was completely different. This might be the most important secret about In a Lonely Place. The ending you see in the finished movie? That wasn't the original plan, not even close. In the first version of the script, based on Dorothy B. Hughes's 1947 novel, Dixon Steele was actually guilty. He was the killer. The movie was supposed to end with Laurel discovering the truth and Dixon being caught. It was dark. It was final. It was a punch to the stomach. But Nicholas Ray changed his mind during production. Some say it was because of his crumbling marriage to Grahame. He wanted the ending to reflect something more painful than murder, the death of love itself. In the new ending, Dix is not the killer. He's innocent of the crime. But it doesn't matter. Laurel has already seen enough of his rage, his jealousy, his darkness. She can't love him anymore. The final scene shows them walking away from each other. No arrest, no confession. Just two people who could have been everything to each other, standing in silence, with nothing left to say. Ray later said this ending was far more devastating than a murder confession. A man who loses his freedom goes to jail, he said. A man who loses love goes to hell. The studio wasn't sure about the change. They wanted something cleaner, something audiences could understand easily. But Ray fought for it, and he won. That ending is now considered one of the greatest in film noir history. It proved that sometimes the scariest thing isn't a killer on the loose. It's watching love die right in front of your eyes and knowing nobody can save it. Number 17. Gloria Grahame had a secret technique for her lips. Gloria Grahame was one of the most beautiful women in Hollywood, but she had an insecurity that might surprise you. She didn't like her upper lip. She thought it was too thin, too flat, and it bothered her deeply. So she came up with a solution that nobody else in the business was doing at the time. Before every scene, Grahame would carefully stuff small pieces of cotton or tissue inside her upper lip, between her gum and her skin. This made her lip look slightly fuller, slightly pootier. It was her secret weapon. On the set of In a Lonely Place, the makeup team knew about it. They helped her perfect the technique. But it caused a real problem. The cotton would sometimes shift during long dialogue scenes. Grahame would feel it moving and have to adjust her mouth in tiny, subtle ways. If you watch the film closely, you can sometimes see her pressing her lips together between lines. That's not a character choice. That's an actress adjusting her hidden cotton. Nicholas Ray found it frustrating. He wanted natural performances, and here was his leading lady constantly fiddling with her mouth. But he couldn't deny the result. On camera, Grahame looked stunning. That slightly full, slightly mysterious lip became one of her trademarks. It gave her face a softness that contrasted perfectly with the hard, dark world of the film. Years later, Grahame admitted to the trick in interviews. She laughed about it, but you could tell it still bothered her. In a town that demanded perfection, she found her own quiet way to reshape herself. It was a tiny act of control in a world where women had very little. What looked effortless on screen was actually a small secret battle fought before every single take. Number 16. The movie was a box office disappointment. Here's a fact that still surprises people. In a Lonely Place, now considered one of the greatest film noirs ever made, was not a hit when it first came out. Not even close. When it opened in 1950, audiences didn't flock to theaters. The reviews were mixed. Some critics praised Bogart's performance, calling it raw and powerful. But others said the movie was too slow, too quiet, too ambiguous. Audiences in 1950 wanted clear heroes and clear villains. They wanted the detective to solve the case and the bad guy to go to jail. In a Lonely Place didn't give them that. Instead, it gave them a complicated man who might be dangerous, a woman who might be making the worst mistake of her life, and an ending that answered the murder mystery but left the emotional questions wide open. Columbia Pictures was disappointed. They had hoped Bogart's name alone would fill seats. They promoted the movie as a thriller, but it didn't feel like one. It felt like a sad, beautiful poem about loneliness and broken trust. The movie made back its budget, but just barely. It wasn't the kind of success anyone celebrated. And yet something strange happened over the years. People kept talking about it. Film students discovered it. Critics revisited it. By the 1970s, In a Lonely Place was being called a masterpiece. By the 1990s, it was on almost every list of essential film noir. Directors like Martin Scorsese named it as one of their favorites. The movie that audiences once ignored became one of the most studied films in cinema history. It just needed time. Sometimes the world isn't ready for a story. Sometimes a movie has to wait for its audience to grow up. What failed at the box office succeeded in eternity. Number 15. Bogart said it was his best performance. Humphrey Bogart made dozens of movies. He played gangsters, detectives, soldiers, and sailors. He starred in Casablanca. He won an Oscar for The African Queen. He became one of the biggest movie stars in history. But when someone asked him which performance he was most proud of, he didn't say Rick Blaine. He didn't say Charlie Allnut. He said Dixon Steele. Bogart believed that In a Lonely Place was the closest he ever came to playing a real, complete human being. Not a hero, not a villain, just a man, brilliant, angry, lonely, and deeply flawed. He told friends that Dixon Steele was the role where he finally stopped acting tough and started being honest. In most of his other movies, Bogart wore a kind of armor, the cool guy, the guy with the perfect line, the guy who always wins. But Dick Steele doesn't win. He loses the woman he loves because he can't control himself. He's talented but self-destructive. He's charming but frightening. And Bogart played all of that without any of his usual tricks. No tough guy smirk, no clever comeback to save the moment. Just raw, open, painful emotion. Lauren Bacall later confirmed that her husband felt a deep connection to the character. She said Bogart saw parts of himself in Dix, the anger, the impatience, the fear of being truly known by another person. He didn't just play that part, Bacall said. He lived in it. It's a rare thing for an actor to name their best work, and an even rarer thing for audiences and critics to eventually agree. But with In a Lonely Place, everyone came to the same conclusion. This was Bogart at his most human, and that's what made it unforgettable. Number 14. The Apartment Set had a hidden design secret. If you've ever watched In a Lonely Place and felt like the apartment scenes had a strange, almost claustrophobic feeling, you weren't imagining things. The production designer, Robert Peterson, built the apartment sets with a deliberate trick. The ceilings were lower than normal, and the walls were positioned just slightly closer together than a real apartment would have. Not enough to look obviously wrong on camera, but enough to make you feel uneasy without knowing why. This was Nicholas Ray's idea. He wanted the audience to feel trapped, the same way Laurel feels trapped in her relationship with Dix. As the movie goes on and the tension between the two characters grows, Ray had the crew make the spaces even tighter. Furniture was rearranged between scenes to take up more room. Doorways that looked open and inviting in early scenes were shot from angles that made them look narrow and confining later on. The lighting changed too. In the beginning, Laurel's apartment is bright and warm. By the end, shadows creep in from every corner. The windows that once let in sunlight now seem to frame darkness. All of this was carefully planned. Ray drew diagrams showing exactly how the set should feel at each stage of the story. He called it emotional architecture. The walls didn't just hold up the set, they told the story. Most audiences in 1950 didn't consciously notice any of this. But they felt it. They felt the romance turning into a cage. They felt the warmth becoming cold. And that was exactly the point. Great filmmaking isn't always about what you see. Sometimes it's about what you feel without knowing why. The walls were closing in, and nobody even realized it. Number 13. A Real Hollywood Murder inspired the story. The novel that In a Lonely Place is based on was written by Dorothy B. Hughes, and she didn't pull her story from thin air. Hughes was fascinated by real Hollywood crimes, and one case in particular haunted her, the unsolved murder of Elizabeth Short, known to the world as the Black Dahlia. In 1947, Short's body was found in a vacant lot in Los Angeles. The case shocked the nation. It was brutal, mysterious, and it was never solved. Hollywood was terrified because the murder happened in their backyard, in their world of glamour and fame. Hughes began writing her novel shortly after the Black Dahlia case made headlines. She was interested in a specific question. What if the killer was someone charming? What if he was educated, well-spoken, and moved easily through Hollywood's elite circles? What if the most dangerous person at the party was the one everyone liked? That question became the heart of Dixon Steele's character. In Hughes' original novel, Dix is indeed the killer. He's a predator hiding behind wit and intelligence. The book is terrifying because it forces you to spend time inside the mind of someone who seems normal but is deeply, profoundly broken. When the movie adapted the novel, it changed many things, including whether Dix was actually guilty. But that core idea, that danger can wear a handsome face and speak in charming sentences, remained. Every time Dix flashes his temper in the movie, you feel the ghost of the Black Dahlia story underneath. The real murder was never solved. But in a strange way, Dorothy B. Hughes gave the world a kind of answer, not about who did it, but about how evil can hide in plain sight. Fiction told a truth that reality never could. Number 12. One scene. Was shot 14 times because of rain. There's a scene in the movie where Dix and Laurel walk together at night, talking quietly, their faces half lit by street lamps. It's one of the most romantic and heartbreaking scenes in the film. And it almost didn't happen. The scene was supposed to be shot on the Columbia Pictures backlot on a cool, clear evening, but Southern California had other plans. Rain hit the area and wouldn't stop. Day after day, the crew set up the lights, prepared the cameras, got Bogart and Grahame into costume and makeup. And then the rain would start again. They tried shooting between showers, but the ground was wet, the reflections looked wrong, and the sound of dripping water ruined the audio. Nicholas Ray was furious. The schedule was tight, and every day of delay cost money the production didn't have. After almost a week of waiting, Ray made a decision. He would shoot the scene indoors on a rebuilt section of the set, with artificial lighting designed to mimic street lamps. The crew worked through the night to build the new setup. Bogart reportedly sat in his chair, reading a book, waiting patiently. Grahame paced nervously. When they finally shot the scene, something magical happened. The controlled indoor environment actually gave Ray more power over every shadow, every highlight, every flicker of light on the actors' faces. The scene turned out more beautiful than it ever would have been outdoors. Ray later admitted the rain had been a blessing in disguise. "God was telling me to do it better," he joked. That scene, born from frustration and delay, became one of the most visually stunning moments in the entire film. What looked like a perfect night was built from a week of failure. Number 11. Bogart improvised the most famous line. There's a line in a Lonely Place that people still quote today. Dixon Steele, talking about how a love scene should be written, says, "I was born when she kissed me. I died when she left me. I lived a few weeks while she loved me." It's one of the most beautiful and heartbreaking lines in cinema history. and for decades people assumed the screenwriter Andrew Solt wrote it from scratch. But the truth is more complicated. The line existed in an earlier draft of the script, but in a different form. It was longer, clunkier, and didn't have the same punch. During rehearsals, Bogart kept playing with the words. He would say the line, shake his head, then try it again with slight changes. He cut words. He rearranged phrases. He turned a paragraph into 3 short, perfect sentences. Nicholas Ray watched this happen and didn't interfere. He recognized that Bogart was finding something special. When they finally shot the scene, Bogart delivered the trimmed, polished version, the one we all know today. Andrew Solt was generous about it. He admitted that Bogart's instinct for rhythm and economy made the line immortal. "I gave him the raw material," Solt said. "He built the house." That line has since appeared on countless lists of the greatest movie quotes ever. It's been printed on posters, whispered in film classes, and borrowed by writers who wish they'd thought of it first. And it almost didn't exist in that form. If Bogart had just read what was on the page and moved on, the world would have lost one of its most perfect descriptions of doomed love. 3 sentences, 18 words, a lifetime of feeling. That's the power of an actor who doesn't just read lines. He lives them. Number 10. Gloria Grahame couldn't stand. Watching the rushes in Hollywood, rushes or dailies are the raw footage shot each day. The cast and crew usually gather to watch them, checking performances, lighting, and camera angles. It's a normal part of making a movie. But Gloria Grahame refused to watch them during In a Lonely Place. She hated seeing herself on screen during production. It made her anxious, self-conscious, and unable to focus on the next day's work. She told Nicholas Ray that watching the rushes made her feel like she was standing outside herself, judging. And once she started judging, she couldn't stop. Every tiny flaw became enormous in her mind. A wrong glance, a slightly off expression, the way her hair moved. She would obsess over these details and then try to fix them in the next scene, which only made things worse. Ray tried to convince her that watching the dailies would help her improve. She refused every time. Instead, she relied entirely on Ray's direction and Bogart's energy in the scene. She trusted the moment rather than the playback. And here's what's remarkable. Many critics consider Grahame's performance in a Lonely Place to be her finest work. She's natural, vulnerable, and completely present in every scene. There's no self-consciousness, no visible effort. She simply exists as Laurel Gray, a woman falling in love with a man she's beginning to fear. Some of that magic may have come precisely from her refusal to watch herself. She never second-guessed. She never tried to recreate a good take. She just showed up, listened to her co-star, and responded honestly. In an industry obsessed with watching, reviewing, and perfecting, Grahame chose to trust the unknown. What terrified her became her greatest strength. Number 9. The film's cinematographer created a new lighting technique. Burnett Guffey was the cinematographer of In a Lonely Place, and he brought something truly special to the film, a lighting approach that other directors would copy for years to come. Guffey had worked on many films before, but this project pushed him to experiment. Nicholas Ray wanted the movie to feel different from other film noirs. Most noir films used heavy, dramatic shadows, pitch black next to bright white. It was bold and striking, but Ray thought it felt artificial. He wanted something softer, something that felt like real life, but still carried that dark, moody atmosphere. Guffey developed what he called graduated shadow. Instead of sharp lines between light and dark, he used diffusion screens and carefully positioned reflectors to create shadows that faded slowly, like a sunset turning into night. The effect was subtle, but powerful. Characters didn't step from light into darkness. They drifted into it gradually. You could watch a scene and feel the mood shifting before you even realized why. The most striking example is the final confrontation between Dix and Laurel. Watch Bogart's face in that scene. One side is lit warmly, almost tenderly. The other side slowly falls into shadow as his anger builds. It's not a sudden change. It's a slow, creeping darkness, like watching storm clouds gather. Guffey spent hours adjusting lights for some of these shots. The crew sometimes had to wait while he moved a single lamp by just a few inches. It was painstaking, detailed work. But the result was a film that looked unlike anything else in 1950. Guffey later won 2 Academy Awards for cinematography on other projects, but he always said, "In a Lonely Place" was where he truly found his voice as an artist. New light from old shadows. Number 8. A key supporting actor was cast. Just 2 days before shooting, Frank Lovejoy, who plays Dix's friend and neighbor, Brub Nikolai, was not the first choice for the role. In fact, he wasn't even the 5th choice. The part of Brub had been offered to several actors, all of whom turned it down for various reasons. Some didn't want to play a supporting role next to Bogart. Others had scheduling conflicts. One actor accepted the part and then backed out just 4 days before his scenes were scheduled to begin. Nicholas Ray was in a panic. Brub Nikolai is not a small role. He's the detective investigating the murder, and he's also Dix's war buddy and friend. The character has to balance loyalty and suspicion, friendship and duty. It's a tricky part that requires real skill. Ray started calling everyone he knew. Studio executives made suggestions. Casting directors pulled files. And then someone mentioned Frank Lovejoy, a stage actor who had recently moved to Hollywood and was looking for film work. Lovejoy came in to read for Ray on a Tuesday afternoon. By Tuesday evening, he had the part. By Thursday morning, he was on set in costume, running lines with Humphrey Bogart. There was no time for rehearsal, no time for character development meetings. Lovejoy just had to show up and be good, and he was more than good. He was perfect. His natural warmth and quiet decency made Brub feel like a real person, not a plot device. You genuinely believe he cares about Dix and is torn apart by the investigation. Critics singled out Lovejoy's performance as one of the film's hidden treasures. He went on to have a solid career in film and television. But it all started with a desperate phone call and 48 hours of pure courage. Sometimes the last choice becomes the best one. Number 7. Bogart refused to rehearse the violent scenes. This is one of those facts that reveals something deep about how Humphrey Bogart approached his craft. For most of the movie, Bogart was a professional. He learned his lines, hit his marks, and worked efficiently. But when it came to the scenes where Dixon Steele loses his temper, the moments of sudden, explosive violence, Bogart refused to rehearse. He told Nicholas Ray that rehearsing violent scenes drained them of their power. If he practiced the rage over and over, it would start to feel mechanical, like going through the motions. He wanted the violence to feel spontaneous, unexpected, and shocking, the same way it would feel in real life. Ray was nervous about this approach. Without rehearsal, the other actors didn't know exactly what was coming. The camera operators couldn't predict Bogart's movements precisely. Everything was a little bit uncertain, but Ray trusted Bogart and agreed to try it. The results were extraordinary. Watch the scene where Dix nearly strangles a man in a fit of rage. There's a rawness to it that feels completely real. The other actor's fear is genuine. He didn't know exactly how far Bogart would go. The camera wobbles slightly because the operator was reacting in real time. Even the lighting feels slightly off because Bogart moved to a spot no one expected. All of these imperfections made the scene feel alive and dangerous. You watch it and your heart races because some primitive part of your brain believes it's really happening. Bogart understood something that many actors miss. True violence isn't choreographed and clean. It's messy, sudden, and terrifying. By refusing to rehearse, he kept that terror alive on camera. What looked uncontrolled was actually a very controlled decision to embrace chaos. Number 6. The movie almost had a completely different director. Before Nicholas Ray ever read the script, In a Lonely Place was being developed with a different director at the helm, a man named John Farrow. Farrow was an experienced filmmaker with a good reputation. He had directed several successful noirs and thrillers, and Columbia Pictures felt comfortable with him leading the project. Farrow worked on the script for several weeks and even began preliminary casting discussions. His vision for the film was more traditional, a straightforward murder mystery with Bogart as a tough, complicated hero who would eventually be cleared of suspicion in a dramatic climax. It was solid, commercial, and safe. But then something happened. Humphrey Bogart's production company, Santana Productions, had significant creative control over the project. Bogart himself was involved in major decisions, and he wasn't satisfied with Farrow's direction. He felt the script was becoming too conventional, too much like every other noir coming out of Hollywood at the time. Bogart had recently seen Nicholas Ray's debut film, They Live by Night, from 1948. He was struck by Ray's emotional honesty and his willingness to let characters be complicated and contradictory. Bogart pushed for Ray to replace Farrow. The studio resisted at first. Ray was young, relatively unproven, and known for being difficult. But Bogart held firm. He believed Ray could turn the material into something special, something that went beyond a simple whodunit. Farrow was removed from the project, and Ray took over. He immediately began reshaping the script, adding psychological depth and ambiguity. The movie that emerged was nothing like what Farrow had planned. It was darker, sadder, more beautiful, and far more complex. John Farrow went on to direct other good films, but In a Lonely Place became a masterpiece because one actor trusted his instinct about one young director. A different choice, and this movie might have been forgotten. Number 5. The grapefruit scene was inspired by a real Bogart story. There's a moment in the film where Dix, in a flash of anger, does something violent and unexpected with an object at a table, a small, quick burst of rage that catches everyone off guard. That moment has its roots in a real incident from Bogart's life. According to crew members who worked on the film, Bogart once told a story about a dinner party he attended in the 1940s. He was in a foul mood that night, drinking heavily, and something someone said set him off. Without warning, Bogart grabbed a piece of fruit from the table and hurled it across the room. The party went silent. His wife at the time was mortified. Bogart himself was embarrassed once he calmed down. But the image stuck with him, a sophisticated man in a nice suit, at a beautiful table, suddenly revealing something ugly and uncontrollable. When he read the script for In a Lonely Place and saw that Dix was supposed to have moments of sudden rage, Bogart remembered that dinner party. He suggested to Nicholas Ray that Dix's outbursts should come from nowhere, quiet 1 second, explosive the next, and then quiet again, as if nothing happened. Ray loved the idea. He worked with Bogart to build these tiny eruptions into several scenes. They're never dramatic showpieces. They're small, quick, and deeply unsettling. That's what makes them effective. Real anger doesn't announce itself with dramatic music. It just appears, like a crack in a wall you thought was solid. Bogart pulled from his own worst moments to create something true on screen. He wasn't proud of those moments in his real life, but he was smart enough to use them. Sometimes the ugliest truths make the most honest art. Real life became real life, and nobody could tell the difference. Number 4. The script went through 7. Major rewrites. Getting the script of In a Lonely Place right was a long, painful process that tested everyone involved. The original adaptation of Dorothy B. Hughes's novel was written by Edmund H. North. It was faithful to the book, meaning Dix was clearly the killer, and the story was essentially a cat-and-mouse thriller. But when Nicholas Ray came aboard, he wanted changes. Big changes. Ray brought in Andrew Solt to do a major rewrite. Solt's version shifted the focus from the murder mystery to the love story. The question wasn't really, did Dix kill the girl anymore? It was, can Laurel love a man she's afraid of? This was a radical change, and the studio wasn't sure about it. They ordered another rewrite that tried to balance both approaches. Then Bogart had notes. He wanted Dix to be more sympathetic in certain scenes. Another rewrite. Then the Production Code Office, Hollywood Censorship Board, flagged several scenes as too violent or too suggestive. More changes. By the time cameras rolled, the script had gone through 7 significant drafts, with input from at least 4 different writers, plus Ray and Bogart themselves. Pages were still being rewritten during production. Actors would sometimes receive new dialogue the morning of a shoot, with barely enough time to memorize it before the cameras rolled. Gloria Grahame later said that the constantly changing script actually helped her performance. "I never knew exactly what was going to happen next," she said, and neither did Laurel. The chaos of the writing process accidentally created a feeling of uncertainty that perfectly matched the movie's themes. Nothing felt settled, nothing felt safe, just like the relationship at the center of the story. 7 drafts to find the truth. Sometimes the hardest part of telling a story is figuring out what the story really is. Number 3. Nicholas Ray. He had a personal message in the final shot. The final shot of In a Lonely Place is one of the most discussed images in film noir. Dix walks away from Laurel's apartment, alone, disappearing into the courtyard as the camera holds steady. It's quiet. It's devastating. And according to people who knew Nicholas Ray well, it was deeply personal. Ray reportedly told his assistant that the final shot was his way of saying goodbye to Gloria Grahame, not just as Laurel Gray, but as his wife. Their divorce was essentially decided by the time filming ended. They were living separately. The love was gone, and Ray channeled all of that loss into the way he composed and held that final image. He insisted on shooting it himself, operating the camera personally for the only time during production. He didn't want anyone else framing this moment. The shot holds longer than it needs to for storytelling purposes. Dix has already made his exit. The scene is over. Scene. But Ray keeps the camera rolling, watching the empty courtyard, the closed door, the stillness of a place where love used to live. Some editors at Columbia wanted to trim the shot. Ray refused. He said the audience needed to sit in that emptiness, to feel the weight of it. He was right, but he was also talking about himself. He needed to sit in that emptiness too. Years later, in interviews, Ray rarely talked about In a Lonely Place without getting emotional. He called it the most honest film he ever made. He said every movie is a lie, but this one told the truth. That final shot, a man walking away, a door closing, silence, was Nicholas Ray's heart on screen. He didn't just direct that moment. He lived it. Some goodbyes happen in life. Some happen through art. And some happen in both places at once. Number 2. The Courtyard set was based on a real Hollywood apartment. The Courtyard apartment complex where most of In a Lonely Place takes place isn't just a generic movie set. It was carefully modeled after a real building, the Villa Primavera Apartments in West Hollywood, located on Harper Avenue. This was a famous residential building in the 1940s, known for housing writers, actors, and other creative people trying to make it in the entertainment industry. Nicholas Ray had actually lived in a similar courtyard apartment complex during his early years in Hollywood, and he insisted that the set capture the very specific feeling of those places, the way neighbors could see into each other's lives, the way sounds carried across the courtyard at night, the way intimacy and surveillance existed side by side. Production designer Robert Peterson visited several real courtyard apartments in the Hollywood area before building the set. He studied the layout, the architecture, the vegetation, and especially the sight lines. Who could see what from which window? This mattered enormously to the plot. Laurel's apartment faces Dix's apartment. They can watch each other. Their romance begins through glances across the courtyard, and it unravels the same way, through watching, suspecting, and fearing what they see. The set was built on a Columbia Pictures soundstage, but it felt real. Real bougainvillea was brought in. Real Spanish tiles were used on the walkways. The fountain in the center actually worked. Actors said that stepping onto that set felt like walking into a real place, not a movie construction. That sense of reality helped ground the performances. It also served as a metaphor for the movie's themes. In a courtyard like this, everyone is close but separate. Everyone can see, but nobody truly knows. It's community and isolation at the same time, just like Hollywood itself. The set was torn down after filming, but the feeling it created lives forever on celluloid. Number 1. The film changed. How Hollywood portrayed writers forever before. In A Lonely Place, writers in Hollywood movies were usually shown in one of two ways, either as noble, struggling artists starving in garrets, or as witty, charming gentlemen tossing off brilliant lines at cocktail parties. Dixon Steele was neither. He was the first truly complex portrayal of a writer in American cinema, talented but blocked, charming but violent, intelligent but self-destructive. He could write the most beautiful love scene you've ever read and then break a man's nose in a parking lot. Nobody had ever seen that combination on screen before. The film suggested something radical for 1950, that creativity and darkness might live in the same person. That the ability to understand human emotion deeply enough to write about it might come from a place of pain. That the artist and the monster might share the same face. This idea was groundbreaking, and it influenced decades of storytelling that followed. When you watch later films about troubled writers, Barton Fink, The Shining, Adaptation, Misery, you can trace a direct line back to Dixon Steele. He was the template. The brilliant, tormented writer who might be capable of terrible things became an archetype, and it started here. Screenwriters in Hollywood particularly connected with the character. Many of them knew what it felt like to be talented and dismissed, to have great ideas and no power, to rage against a system that used their words but didn't respect their craft. Dick Steele spoke for all of them. In the years since its release, In a Lonely Place has been cited by more screenwriters as their favorite film than almost any other. It's the movie that finally showed the world what it really feels like to be a writer. The glory and the agony, the brilliance and the loneliness. One character changed an entire genre's understanding of the creative soul. That wasn't just acting, that was revolution. Bonus fact: the lost alternate ending that was actually filmed. Here's something that even die-hard fans of In a Lonely Place might not know. There was a third ending, not the novel's ending, where Dix is the killer, and not the final film's ending, where Dix and Laurel simply drift apart. There was a middle version that was actually written, rehearsed, and shot on set. In this version, Dix completely loses control during the final confrontation with Laurel. Overcome by rage and jealousy, he strangles her, and she dies. Then the phone rings. It's the police, calling to tell Dix that the real killer has been caught. Dix is innocent, but it's too late. Laurel is gone. Dix answers the phone, hears the news, and simply hangs up. The camera holds on his face, a face showing the most devastating realization a person can have. He was innocent of one crime but has just committed another. The scene was reportedly shot over the course of a full day. Bogart and Grahame performed it multiple times. Crew members said the atmosphere on set was unbearably tense. When Bogart performed the moment of realization, the phone call, the silence, the understanding of what he'd done, several people on set were in tears. But when Nicholas Ray watched the footage, he felt it was wrong. Not technically. The performances were extraordinary. But emotionally, it was too final, too complete. It gave the audience a clear ending, a definitive tragedy. Ray wanted something more haunting, an ending that would follow the audience home and keep them awake at night. He wanted them to wonder, to feel unsettled, to carry the movie's sadness with them. So he scrapped the filmed ending and created the version we know today, the quiet, ambiguous separation. The footage of the alternate ending was never included in any release of the film. For decades, people assumed it was destroyed. But in the early 2000s, film historians discovered references to it in Columbia Pictures archives. The footage itself has never been found, but production notes, still photographs, and written descriptions survive. It remains one of the great lost scenes in cinema history. Ray chose ambiguity over closure, and that choice made the movie immortal. What could have been a tragedy became something deeper, a mystery of the heart that never gets solved. The ending that was erased made the ending that remained even more powerful. In a Lonely Place is not just a movie about a murder mystery. It's not just a movie about Hollywood. It's a movie about the hardest question any of us will ever face. Can you love someone you're afraid of? Can you trust someone whose darkness you've seen? And can you forgive yourself for the damage you've done to the people who tried to love you? Humphrey Bogart, Gloria Grahame, and Nicholas Ray poured their real lives into this film. Their pain became art. Their broken relationships became one of the most honest love stories ever told. And the result was a movie that didn't find its audience in 1950, but found something more important. It found eternity. Every frame of this film carries a truth about human nature. We are all capable of great tenderness and great cruelty. We can write the most beautiful words and then destroy the person we wrote them for. That's the tragedy of In a Lonely Place, and it's the tragedy of being human. 75 years later, this movie still whispers to us in the dark. It still asks its questions. It still waits for answers that never come.